Well, much of how-to radio or celebrity radio, some of the most commercial, popular stuff, is all about perkiness and upbeatness and success. And um, because this is non-commercial radio, I think it's a particularly good venue to talk about the realities that aren't so puffy. Uh, So I'm going to devote this episode of How to Do Life to three kinds of sad, unhappy people who don't get a lot of coverage in standard commercial radio. Sad people, anxious people, and angry people. I'm going to describe them a little bit with three composite letters, and then I'm going to uh, really kind of just uh, freely think about and think out loud to you about what I would say to such a person to try to make their life better or be more accepting. So we'll start with the sad person. Dear Dr. Marty, I am not depressed. I'm just a kind of sad person. I get everything done, but I don't laugh like most people. Even at things that people find hysterical, like Monty Python or Seinfeld or Tina Fey or Chris Rock. Should I just accept that I'm a serious person? Yes, I think you do. If you have always been a sad person from when you were a child, the chances are that it's at least partly your character, your temperament. And yes, it may be at least partly caused by some event like child abuse. But it probably is fundamentally, if you've been that way all your life, you're not going to turn into a chirpy, cheery, happy-go-lucky, hail fellow well-meant Pollyanna. And that's true, I think, of most psychological problems, that you're normally, or not just problems, most characteristics. Almost in the same way as we have to accept our height, and it generally tend to body type. There's some people who are just skinny malinks, and they'll always be, and there are other people who tend to gain weight. And I think that's a good example. I have a tendency to be moderately heavy, as my dad was. And while I'm probably more careful than most people, I have a real hard time losing weight. So I'm 15 pounds, 20 pounds overweight, and I exercise like a fiend, and I'm pretty damn careful about my diet. I've written a lot about the art of keeping your weight under control, and I'm not 15, 20 pounds overweight. I can lose it maybe very temporarily, but then my hunger gets the best of me. So for all personality characteristics, including all three that I'm going to talk about today, the sad person, I'm not talking about clinically depressed. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not going to be offering advice about people who are clinically depressed. I'm just talking about people who are mildly sad, who are anxious, moderately anxious, and who have a predisposition to anger. So for all of those, I think the self-acceptance is probably pretty foundational. And there are ways, I think, if you're going to be self-accepting about it and just kind of change your environment, that can really help. So for some people, they who are sad by nature, they're better off if they spend a lot of time with happy people because it brings them up. But then there are other people who are sad, and being around those people just makes them feel out of place, and they're more likely to not be accepted by the group, and so they're better off being with other sad people or being quite solo, spending much of their time by themselves. I'm sure many of the great writers, not just of the classical era, but even screenwriters and the like, even news writers are not necessarily the most collaborative people, and they just spend a lot of time alone. So that's the first thing that comes to mind is for if you're a sad person. You might also want to pursue activities where being a sad, which tends to correlate with being a serious person, might be wise. So if you're dealing with something that's life or death, mission critical, if you're a dynamite worker, a bomb dismantler, a nurse, somebody involved in the medical equipment industry or the pharmaceutical industry where precision is very, very important. It's life and death. Or working in hospice as a nurse, or in the funeral industry, in the so-called death industry. There's always, I guess, some room for humor and being upbeat, and maybe that's what's required. But you may want to ask yourself if you think you would be happier and more successful as a sad person working in any of those industries. Now, assuming that, excuse me, that you would like to improve, to be a little less sad, you're not going to go from 0 to 10, but maybe you can go from a 3 on the 10's happiness scale to a 5. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, I almost feel embarrassed to talk about it because it's so cliched, but it's gratitude. Even amid all of the COVID fears and the racial roiling and the sense that among many, especially I live here in the Bay Area, and there's so much hand wringing about, is the world going to come to end because of climate change? Are we a white supremacist racist society? Is going to doom us or whatever? There is much to be grateful for, whether it be our own life, even if our life is crappy. I'm not going to talk about people who have money or whatever. But if you've got a reasonable amount of health, or you've got kids, a kid that you love, or a romantic partner, or a friend, or you simply enjoy nature and or the pleasure of taking a walk, or the pleasure of food, or of sex, of watching YouTube. It's a miracle, right? You certainly may have better things to do than listen to me or watch me on YouTube with my sober face. But it's still amazing. It's free, and it's there for you. It's like I'm here for you 24/7, 365 for free. No commercials. Pretty damn good. So feeling some gratitude may help. Let me see. I had something that I wanted to look up for you, and I did. Let me take a moment here about the sadness thing. Let's see if it can get to load quickly, if I'm lucky. It's going to take me just one more second. Yeah, okay, here it is. Okay. So, see, is there anything I haven't told you that I want to tell you about sadness? It's part of the self-acceptance thing. Accepting is one thing, but embracing takes it to the next level. Maybe you need to celebrate it. Like there's a whole movement for people with autism to celebrate their autism as being just not neurotypical. Or obese people that talk about fat acceptance. I don't know if I'd go that far. But being a serious person or a sad person may have a big silver lining. You may not have as a life as a happy-go-lucky type might. But serious people do tend to generate serious accomplishment. So maybe your soberness, that's differentiated from sobriety, although maybe both of them count, can enable you to accomplish more and thus ultimately have more meaning in your life. Then back to little steps for improving if you're a sad person. Let's say, might you be a little happier if you did tackle something that, while you may be characterologically predisposed toward being a sad person, would you be a little happier if you, say, learned the computer better, or lost the 15 pounds I wish I could lose, or any kind of whatever goal you might have that could make you feel good. Even could be helping your child do better in school, or whatever the hell it is, improve your sex life. You might want to inventory the things that make you feel better. What are the activities at work and outside of work that make you feel good? I mean, society may expect you to enjoy the fun activities like parties, dancing, drinking, but look inward. What makes you feel better? You probably want to do more of those things and fewer of the others, if you can. I mean, we all have our social obligations, but, maybe making a conscious effort to do more of those things that do make you happier may help. All right, now, those are people who are sad by nature. I want to talk a little bit about people who are sad in situations. You know, there's some event, like let's say a person. There are some people. A lot of my clients have come to me and say they, you know, and I don't say it the first thing out of their mouth, but eventually they come to say they feel pretty worthless, useless, and it can take a toll on a person if, say, they've been bad at school. It happens, you know, goes on over year after year after year, or they were good at school but they were bad in the work world, or they've been unsuccessful in their relationships. Maybe it's their romantic. They have never had, quote, luck in love, or friendships haven't worked out particularly. They don't have many good friends, or maybe their kid has turned out badly, and their parent feels guilty, or they're not being good as an adult child and not being great with their aging parent. So the question is, as a sad person, do you want to focus on your relative strengths? Maybe you are pretty good at whatever it is. You know, you enjoy doing tax returns. I just did mine. You enjoy planting a garden, or you enjoy listening to music, or playing music, even if it's only for yourself, or writing in your journal, or even the great American novel, even the not so great American novel. Or do you want to try to remediate an important weakness? As I said, try to lose that 10 pounds, maybe improve your attitude at work, you know, get better at softball, whatever the hell it is. Another situational cause of sadness is jealousy. Some people become sad because they saw, you know, somebody at work or a friend or a family member get real successful while they were languishing. Would it help you to use your jealousy to fuel your efforts to try to compete with them, or would you be wiser to compete just with yourself and on whatever your chosen metric is? You know, like if my chosen metric was the ability to fix things or to draw, I'd get more depressed. But the metrics I care about are my ability to be prolific in using my words and verbally and in writing to hopefully make a difference. So I'm competing with myself only on my metrics and try to be the best writer and speaker I can be. And the thing is, you see, I have experimented with scripted approaches, but I found that I think that then I actually make a bigger difference and more credibility, and there's more space in between. You need to allow space for people to process. And by talking ad lib, I think I end up being not just more authentic, but I think it and ultimately may end up being helpful if people have the patience to listen to this half hour. Who the hell knows? But anyway, and you know, certainly if you're, I'll just turn to another situational cause of sadness, which would be when you have loss. Of course, most people are going to get sad when they've lost a parent or a loved one of any sort, or a romantic partner, you know, a friend, or if you've had a career setback, you didn't get a promotion you wanted, you got laid off, the COVID thing got you, whatever the hell it is. And so the question is, there really are, you know, it's a continuum of people. Some people really feel the need to keep processing it until they can get over their grief about their loss. And there are other people who decide to think about it more is going to merely keep their negative thoughts top of mind, and so they try to suppress the negative thoughts and don't do the grieving thing, and they just try to take baby steps forward. The question is about you, which is right for you. If you're a sad person, or you know, you experience the loss, even if you're not a sad person. And the final thing, which is the worst, of course, of these situational reasons to be sad, is if you got some terrible diagnosis. Anybody's going to be sad because of that. The question is, it seems to me that there are some people who do best by picturing the worst possible outcome and facing that and realize that, okay, even in worst case, if I die, you know, I've had this much, I've had the experience of, you know, being whatever, successful at work, or my relationships with my family, or whatever, or at least, or if I've been a miserable, unhappy person, at least the agony is then over. You know, so some people are better off facing the very worst. Other people are more likely to be kind of rational and say, I'm going to focus on the most likely outcome. I may have stage 3 cancer, but you know, the cure rate is reasonable, and if I am diligent about following the procedures or whatever, I'll have some good extended life and quality of life. Or do you want to have an optimistic one, an optimistic vision that, that is that going to make you feel better? If you're a sad person, it's particularly important to kind of almost see if you can choose your what you're going to focus on. Also, do you want to talk about the bad diagnosis? Some people really want to process it and talk about it. Other people want to suppress it. Question is of you. Do you want to pull out all the stops to try to stop that stage 3 cancer? Or do you want to, take a more moderate approach or even a minimalist approach? All those, we're talking here about how to deal with if you have a sad personality. And talking about, at this point now, we're talking about the situational sadness that could exist if you weren't always that way. You didn't come out of the womb sad or were sad always as a child. But there was some event that drove it. In any case, those are my thoughts. I'll just briefly summarize. So, yeah, like any personality characteristic, I think it's really important that you practice self-acceptance of your character, whether it's happy or sad or angry or whatever. There's going to be a certain self-acceptance that's going to be required. And then, as usual, the answers come into either either baby steps forward, processing it, or suppression of the worrisome thing. And so when I come back from the break, I'm going to talk about a person who tends to be anxious, and then I'm going to talk about a person who tends to be angry, and offer some tips there. They won't be as long because we don't have so much time. But I'm Marty Nemko. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with me. Here's another composite letter. This one is from somebody who is an anxious person. A composite letter, and then my thoughts, unscripted, as to my best advice to such a person. This person writes, "I worry about everything: how I look, whether I'm doing a good job, whether I'll die young. How do I stop worrying so much?" Well, again, there'll be a certain amount of self-acceptance. There are some people who just are really easygoing, relaxed, and devil may care, and that's just who they are. But unfortunately, you are, I think it's fair to say, cursed with the worry thing. Maybe, in terms of self-acceptance, we'll get to try to improve in a minute. But I think worriers tend to be, on average, and maybe I'm just, I have no basis for saying this, tend to be more intelligent, because there's, when you're smart, that you can see all the possible negative outcomes. If you tend not to be that bright, you tend to only see what's right in front of you. I may be wrong about that. Please don't stick this to me. I could be wrong. And also, if you worry, you're more likely to want to focus on fix it. Not if you're paralyzingly worried, but if you tend to worry about things, you're more likely to use that worry to fuel you to try to come up with solutions. And again, this is completely unjustified. This is the feeling I have. That if I'm talking with a worrier, somebody who's worried, they're more likely to be a good person. They're more likely to care about everything. Worry me is a proxy for one form of caring. And I think if I had a choice between two otherwise equal people to be my friend, I think I would choose a worrier rather than a devil may care person, for the reasons I've kind of outlined. But that all said, it ain't fun to spend your life as a worrier. So what can you do about worrying? And again, I'm always cringing when I give advice that can be simplistic. But it's my best shot, and we may not be able to adopt it permanently, or it may not fully solve the problem. But the best advice normally for a worrier is to use this little formula, is to say, okay, first take a deep breath or two so you don't get overwhelmed. When you're overwhelmed with worry, you can't think. So whatever it is, take a walk, exercise, take a shower, or whatever the hell it is, to get you at least into a place where you can think. And then say to yourself, okay, what can I do about this? Or maybe you want to start even by saying, no, what's the best case and what's the worst case scenario? Sometimes facing the worst case scenario can be critical to, helping you. Unless you have stage 4 cancer, chances are, if you can face the worst, let's say you lost a job and you became homeless, while of course that would not be good, but it's even possible that it would be for the best, that you would force you to change your career to something you like better, or to live less materialistically. As bad as it is, there may be some silver linings in it. Just like there seem to be some silver linings in COVID. There are a lot of people who are in some ways enjoying the slower life, not just the less traffic, because people aren't going to work, but there are people who do have more time to enjoy the simple pleasures. So, one of the ways to conquer worry may be to anticipate the worst, or, as they used to say, prepare for the worst but hope for the best. So then, in addition to thinking about could you survive the worst case, maybe you'll worry less if you, then think of what would be the best case and how you could make that best case come about. And that's the great thing. If you can say to yourself, okay, there is something I can do about this worry, and I'm going to do it. But then the magic part, and it's not easy, I'm not saying it's easy, believe me, is to then, once you've decided you've done what you can, you must, and it's not a psychologist's kind of word, you must force yourself. Yes, force yourself to not think about it. You've got to immediately distract yourself. The first nanosecond, the idea, the worry comes into your mind when you know there's nothing you can do about it. You have to. You have to say stop. Even say it aloud. And you need to distract yourself with something that's going to then occupy your mind. Helping others is a particularly good idea, but it could be your work life, could be a fun thing, could be watching Netflix, whatever. But that I know is true. I really do, for most people. Just, they say, oh no, some shrinks say, no, if you distract yourself, it'll only come out some other way. No, I've not found that. Rarely. And nothing is always true with people. People are not electrons. They're not perfectly, they don't behave predictably. But if you can make it into the habit of when you're worried about something, you can't do anything about it, say stop, distract yourself to something, and I'm guessing that what that does is it atrophies the memory neurons that are associated with the negative thought, and so it's going to be less worrisome. If you process it and keep talking about it and thinking about it, it's more top of mind. The memory neurons may be strengthening like a muscle that you use more, and then you're going to be more worried. Anyway, that's my best thoughts about worry. Now I want to turn finally to anger and let you listening know, first of all, you're listening to How to Do Life. I'm Marty Nemko. If you're listening to it as the podcast or even live on, not live, but broadcast on KSFP 102.5 FM public radio in San Francisco, or you'll be watching me on YouTube. So, angry person. And this is the third composite letter. Person writes, I'm an angry person for no particular reason. I've always been that way. I go from 0 to 60 in 1 second. It's hurt me professionally and personally, and I can't seem to control myself. Any advice? Right. I do believe that, as with many characteristics about people, from height and weight to personality to impulse control to, yes, intelligence, there is at least a partial genetic component. Everything about us is partly genetic and partly environment. And I believe that anger probably has that too, whether it's as simple as an overactive adrenal gland or something so much more complicated set of characteristics. But some people, we all know them, who just seem to be preternaturally calm. They're calm in the face of even greater stress. And there are other people who get riled up very quickly. So this composite letter is from somebody who obviously gets riled quickly, goes from 0 to 60 in 1 second. Here are my best thoughts on how to deal with that. First is dealing with symptomatic, because anger tends to be an increase in heart rate, blood pressure, that adrenaline flow. So the best thing you can do is, if you can, again, it requires a sense of a measure of discipline, which is very difficult for many people to have. But if you can possibly do it, and if you look back on your life and you see how much, as in this composite letter, how much having an angry personality, being a hothead, has hurt you professionally and personally. If you can make yourself, again, that force word, which people don't like, but it's really accurate. If you can force yourself to take that deep breath when you first feel the anger come on, taking one deep breath 2 deep breaths, that's going to slow your heart rate, blood pressure, and give you a moment to calm down and realize that if you blow up, it's probably not a good idea. Yeah, there's an occasional amount of time, occasionally, that blowing up is worth doing, but it's really very rare. Think back to most of the times you got really angry. To what extent has it really helped? And then after that 1 second, if it's not enough, if you can get yourself to escape the room, that can be helpful. And you may also want to think about the reasons. What's the reasons you should not be angry? Is it not just to avoid hurting yourself in terms of your personal life and your work life? But everybody knows that stress and anger is not good for your health. And I don't know if you can think that long term, but even for self-preservation reasons, maybe think about what's going to motivate you to not be angry or to be less angry. And if at all possible, then after you've taken a deep breath and you're still furious, see if it's, for example, time to say, "Excuse me, I got to go to the bathroom," or before you get something in writing and it makes you furious. There's a tendency, of course, to dash off the response right away, at least among some people who are not procrastinators. But often it's wise to say, "Damn it, I'm going to take a day, and I'm going to view this with fresh eyes the next day." And then ask yourself, am I going to be better off if I respond with anger or not? I've known some people, like negotiators, teachers union negotiators, who fake being angry in order to intimidate people into giving them their way. So sometimes anger can be a useful tool consciously, but more often than not, it's certainly very likely to hurt. And I think that's all I really want to say about anger. So those are the 3 topics we talked about today: living as a sad person, living as an anxious person, and living as an angry person. And so I'm just going to end today's show as I do all shows. I guess I have a few more seconds, so let me think. So again, the general principles are, just to repeat, would be a certain measure of self-acceptance. We are a function of our genes and certainly our early environment as well, and that tends to make it very hard for you to make major changes. So me and everybody else. So try to think about that. Think about accepting your basic self and putting yourself in environments where your basic self will work well. If you're an angry person, you may be better off working with people who don't trigger you or working alone. And then if you're going to try to improve, try to expect minimal changes and do it with baby steps, and make the decision whether you want to actually process it more, think about it more, or you want to suppress it and think about it less and distract yourself. Anyway, so that is how to do life for this week. So this is Marty Nemko reminding you that we find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.